Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV. I figured I would do a quick review about how I shoot my reviews down here in my basement studio. And the core of my entire workflow revolves around the ATEM television studio from Blackmagic. This is a very, very inexpensive switcher, at least by video standards. And I'll show you what it looks like here with my handheld camera. Very inexpensive switcher, which allows you to plug in 4 HDMI sources. And you can see they plug in the back of my little rack mount case here. And you plug those 4 HDMI sources in, and then over on the edge here, it fires everything back off via HDMI into a recorder. And I'll show you that in a minute. But before I do, this is the workstation that you have. So pretty much you can see all of your camera inputs live at any given time. So right now we've got 3 active ones. And the cool thing is that anytime you plug in something new via HDMI, so if we'll go over to my MacBook here and just pop in this HDMI cable, we will pretty much immediately see it pop up on the ATEM studio thing there. So we saw that switchover occur. There it is, and now I can switch to camera 4. And you can see that I've got my computer screen up, and there is the ATEM software control panel that I can use to control everything. And it is really amazing, first of all, how inexpensive this thing is, but also just how useful it is. Now, it's very limited in what it can do to some degree because it doesn't have any onboard special effects or any scalers or anything like that. So it's pretty much whatever you plug in through the wire, you're going to get up on the screen, provided it can fit the resolution that you've set it to. So I shoot at 1080i. You can also have it be a 720p unit if you switch it into 720p. But everything that you plug in has to output at that resolution. So you can't, just plug in something and hope that it upscales it. If it can't output the 1080i or the 720p, depending on the mode you're in, you're not going to be able to use it. So I have to get a scaler, and I'm looking for that because I want to get something that works with retro game consoles all the way up to some of the newer stuff. But let's take a quick look, though, at the control panel itself. And there's more than one way to control this thing also, which is cool. So for those of you that have worked in television, this looks pretty much like any switcher that you've ever been sitting at. And you can control your camera inputs here with just the mouse, or you can, there's some keyboard shortcuts also. You've got one of these little fader bars too, so you can fade things in and out. It does a lot of onboard keying also. So for example, we can load in, I have a thing that I use for CT Tech Junkie, so we'll just pop that in here. You just drag it in, and then I can go back to the switcher, go over to our downstream key here, and our fill source will be Media 1. And then I can pretty much pop that up on air, and you see that it'll keep that little thing down there. And these are Targa files, TGA files that you can load in with Photoshop. There's actually a Photoshop plugin for this thing too, which is pretty cool. So, so you've got some basic stuff that you can do with it. I liken it to the switcher I used at my cable access station 20 years ago. I mean, this is high definition on the ATEM, but it is kind of limited in that functionality. But when you plug a computer in, you can pretty much get whatever the computer can output over the HDMI, and you can use it as a video player. I actually do Skype interviews with it as well, so I'll pop one of those up here and you can see how I did that. So this was an interview I did with Congressman Jim Himes from Connecticut, and I'm talking here, and then I had him on Skype, and when I switched to him, it pretty much works as you'd expect it to, and you almost get your own little satellite interview hub down here in a basement of all places, which is pretty cool. So I've really found a lot of use for it, even though again it's kind of limited. It does do some limited chroma key also, and I did a thing on the Mars landing a few months ago, last year, and we were able to do that. I just set up a little chroma key area because I do some client work now. So I've got this little chroma key set up with another camera over there, and I'm going to start working that into the thing. I found the chroma key isn't so useful on this because it's really picky on the light. I am really bad at lighting, especially lighting chroma keys, so I found that Final Cut Pro is a little more forgiving when you want to do that. So that's pretty neat. Now, one thing that's been happening with this product over time is that they've been adding things to it. So when I bought it, I couldn't get my microphone to plug in directly into the unit. In fact, there was no way to get any audio in unless you purchase some additional stuff. And I'll do another cutaway here, but I have a mixer here from Behringer, and inside the little rack mount case, I have another Behringer unit, which is a analog to digital converter. which then dumps it out to this AES EBU format, which then goes by a coax cable back into the ATEM. So it was really kind of a lot of work to just get audio into it initially. But what they did with a firmware upgrade is they added the ability to bring in audio via HDMI. So if I start playing the thing from the Mac here, you'll see that camera 4, which is my Mac, is outputting audio. And if I hit this,
as when you have people,
you can now hear that audio over it. So if you think about doing interviews and that kind of stuff, you can route your Skype calls right in there. You just dial your HDMI up and you've got a perfect way to bring audio in. What I do so that my guests don't hear everything they're saying back to them is I just use the microphone built into the laptop when I'm doing the interview, and I'm close enough with it right here that it really doesn't impact things too much. I've also, if you watch my podcast called Behind the Video, I now have a little TV screen that I set up an HDMI splitter and ran it out there, so it doesn't look like I'm just talking into the ether here. I actually put the screen up behind me, which is pretty cool. So there's some neat stuff on this thing that you can really get to work with it. And again, it's so easy to use, and generally I just kind of switch between cameras like that, and that's pretty much it. Now there's some other stuff that they've come up with here also, and one of those is, and this is from a third party, but they've opened up the API of the control portion of this thing, and I can now use my iPhone and my iPad to control it. So I just hit the camera I want to look at on the iPhone version. The iPad version has the preview set up also. So on the iPad version, I have it upstairs, but I can just set up a preview camera there and do a little bit more than the iPhone version does. This is an app from Strata on the phone here, by the way, and it's about $10 for this version, and there's another one that does some of the audio and whatnot for a lot more. But I figured, you know what, just for camera control, it's fine. Generally, when I do audio, I set it up before I do whatever I'm doing, and then kind of lock it in and leave it there. So overall, it's a really neat system. Now, in order to get it recording, and here's the thing, is that I really wanted to speed up my workflow very quickly. So I don't have a lot of time. I have 2 jobs. I've got a young child, so I'm really trying to, I enjoy doing these videos, but I really want to make, my time productive, where I'm actually editing something useful as opposed to rendering and all the other stuff. So the ATEM Television Studio has 2 options for outputting your video. The first is via HDMI, which is, basically just it has an HDMI out, and you just plug into that, and you've got an HDMI signal. The other option is a USB port that's on the device, but that only spits out H.264 video, and it looks pretty good. But the problem is that if you bring it into Final Cut or another editing software, it has to render it and do all that kind of stuff. So I went out and said, what else is out there to make this thing work better? And I found this guy. This is the HyperDeck shuttle from Blackmagic, and it is and I did a review of this thing, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it is a solid block of aluminum, and what it does is it takes a solid state disk. So you get any one of those SSDs out there that are on like the I forgot the name of the chipset, but any of the modern really fast solid state drives, they just snap right into this thing like you would put a videotape into something. You hit the record button, and it'll record in uncompressed format, but it also does native QuickTime 422, ProRes 422. So I can bring this over to Final Cut, and there's no rendering, there's no preparation. I can just get to work right on the file. In fact, a lot of times I just edit it right on the same drive that I recorded on. So if I don't screw up too much when I record, I can sometimes crank these things out in like 20 minutes and get them up on YouTube and have them ready to go into viewership mode there. Now on the back, let me just pan around to the back here, hopefully without disconnecting it in the process. On the back, there is an HDMI input and an output. So I can run in here, so this is the HDMI going in. I can run it into this thing, and then I also have an output that I can send elsewhere. And this is really useful for a couple of reasons. So generally when I'm in the studio, I have a little cheapo television set down here that I can just kind of get a sense to make sure I have the right camera up. When I'm looking in the camera, I can see that I have the right image up on the screen. But what I can also do with it is take another Blackmagic product. I feel like I'm doing a lot of product placement for them, but they make some really good stuff. This one is called the Intensity Extreme, and I can loop it out of here into this thing, and then via Thunderbolt plug this into my Mac, and I can then stream live out onto the web with it. So I could use YouTube Live, or I could use Google Hangouts or something. So for my podcast that I do every Sunday morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, you can watch on my channel here, that's what I do. So basically I run it out into one of these Thunderbolt connections and send it off to YouTube Live. At the same time, I'm also getting a high quality recording on the solid state disk. So I have a backup even that's going to YouTube and being recorded up there, but also locally as well. And it's a little bit more involved in the podcast in the morning because I have people I'm bringing in via Google+. So I bought another device here, and this is the HyperDeck Ultra Studio Mini Recorder, and this is basically a one-way ticket, so it just has one HDMI input and a Thunderbolt output, but it works great for just dumping it out to YouTube Live or to Google Plus Hangouts. So that's been pretty helpful. And then another little thing that I bought is this little HDMI to audio adapter. So when I'm interviewing people, what I can do is run all the program audio through this thing into my headphones, so I can hear what my guests are saying, basically running the audio and my audio too. I can monitor that. I basically put this in between the HyperDeck shuttle and the outgoing YouTube Live connection that I'm using with one of the Blackmagic Thunderbolt devices. And it's got a pass-through, so it's got an in and an out, and then it just dumps the audio over to my headphones, and that seems to be working pretty well. As far as cameras go, I'm using really off-the-shelf stuff. So this is a Sony camera that I was sent for review a little while ago. So I use this. I'm going to probably work this into my workflow, and I'm probably going to replace this Canon camera up here, just because it has a hard time with exposure with the lights where I'm pointing it. But typically what I do is I have this camera trained at the desk here, so we can switch to our camera 2 shot. Right now there's nothing here, but there's our little Sony camera. And then I've got the studio camera is here. This is a Canon HF20, I believe. And again, you don't really need anything that high end, because if your lighting is good, these off-the-shelf, inexpensive, older Canon HD cameras really do pretty well. They shoot their HDMI out. I believe they don't even do any compression if you plug them in directly, so you're getting pretty much whatever is on the chip and just fires it right off. This is behind me is a Canon HV20. This is one of the original HDV cameras, and it's a great studio camera. The one reason why I stopped using this one as my main studio camera is that I don't have a crew, so I have no way to focus the camera if it gets off course or whatever. So what I found with the Canon HF20, which is what I have plugged in there, or the HF200, those were introduced probably about 4 or 5 years ago, but they have facial recognition, so they'll automatically find my face and stay focused on it. Because I had a few shoots where I had a great take on something, and then found that it was capturing the background behind me and not capturing me. So that was kind of an issue there. So one of the things that I started doing when I first started doing reviews was I had a chroma key background behind me, but I was having such a hard time lighting it. And again, it was taking time to get everything set up and everything else. So I went out to Amazon. I bought these cheap shelving unit. It will fall down if you touch it right now. But I bought this cheap shelving unit, and then found all my old retro stuff and put it up on the shelf. My wife was quite happy. I found a use for it besides having this stuff sit around. So that's kind of the backdrop we're using. For lighting, I'm using LED lights because I had bought a lighting kit a while ago when I was doing a little bit more field work. And I had these fancier kits from, fancier, I guess they're on Amazon. They're cheap LED lights made in China, but they get the job done. They're not spectacular, but they for what I use it for, they're perfect. So I've got 2 of these 500 watt equivalent units, and I got this big guy here. I don't know, I think it's 1,000 watt equivalent on that one. And they use like very little power, because that lighting kit I was just talking about that I bought initially drew so much power that I was throwing the breakers down in the basement. So I had to get something lower powered, and these LED lights work great, and they're also pretty reliable too. And they don't burn out, they don't use a lot of electricity, they don't heat up. So it's really worked pretty well for all that stuff. So that's where the studio is at the moment, and I hope this was helpful for you to kind of figure out how to do stuff. What I think I'm going to do next is try to take out those 2 audio components out of the picture, because right now I just feel it's just a lot of overkill to have this Behringer mixer and the digital to analog converter thing going there. So I have this H4n, and I use this when I go out in the field. What I do is just detach this mic from the mixer and plug it into this guy. Record the good audio on this, so like my Tesla review and the stuff that I did with the Parrot drone, recorded the audio onto here, and Final Cut Pro, which is what I edit with, automatically syncs the audio from this to the video. So it's really nice. And what this thing also does, though, is it has an output, headphone output. So what I might do with this is hook it up to the camera directly, and then run that audio via HDMI back to the back to the switcher, and that will take a little bit of extra complexity out of the picture. So that's pretty much what we're doing. I'll link to the microphone. This is a cardioid microphone from Shure. And the reason why I picked this is I'm in a basement. There's a lot of noise that happens down here, like furnaces turning on, the water heater and everything else. So this tends to only pick up what is directly above it. So generally, you don't hear a lot of background noise with it, and I found this one to be pretty helpful. So in that Amazon link, I will put this in as well. So I think I covered everything. If I didn't, leave me a comment. I think this will be one of those things where I do an ongoing update as to how I'm using my home studio. But right now, that's the workflow. It's been really working great for me. In fact, I'm going to take this upstairs. I'm just going to drop in a few little other photos and stuff just to show you things a little bit better than maybe I could do with this camera. But after that, I'll have this thing up in probably less than an hour. So pretty fast workflow, and I like it. So this is Lon Simon, and you now can build your own home studio too. Thanks for watching.